Hello, technical glitch there. Apologies for that. Got to press the right buttons. If we don't press the right buttons, then the right things don't happen. Welcome to another Friday here at Go Narrative in Seattle. And we love getting together on Fridays and having a look at a website, doing a teardown. Our homepage is our best foot forward out there on the big wide web, on the internet. Even in this day of AI, we have to get that right. And even, in fact, with AI, it's even more important because we're getting referenced. We all are. We're getting harvested. Our information is being harvested, and the AI is serving us up. So when people go out there and ask for advice and ask for tips, that is what is going to show up, our best foot forward. And so we want to make sure that what's showing up is showing up in the way that we want it to show up, right? And that is just the beginning. If we think about what that website is, what that homepage is, a story that we have the opportunity to tell on our homepage, is that the only place we are going to tell it or use it? Probably not, right? And if you are winging it, then you're going to find that there's going to be this drift, these inconsistencies that pop up. And if you have a strong core, you're going to minimize that drift. When you do the due diligence of making sure that you've got that red line that ties it all together, you will always be able to go back to that. And by always going back to it, whether it's you, your web team, your sales team, it's going to be consistent, right? And in fact, the sales team one is a great and fun example, because having spent many years in corporate America myself at Intel and at Microsoft, I can report back from the front lines that if you're in product marketing or you're in marketing communications and you give content to your sellers that isn't up to scratch, they are going to make their own stuff up, or they're going to use old stuff. And when you're trying to align everybody and train everybody and have everybody telling the same story, that's working against you. But if your sales team knows that you're always going to provide that core story, they know that they can then riff off of that in a way that's still going to link back to that narrative, that strategic narrative that you've spent all the time and energy getting just right. Now, if you're a Series A firm that's trying to get to Series B, one of the big audiences that you have to communicate your story to is going to be investors. So yeah, you've got the web, you've got the pitch decks, you've got the meetings, but you've got the emails, you've got the ability for your story to tell itself. Like, what happens when you're not in the room? Is the same story getting told? That's a question. Think about that for a second. Have you ever run into that problem? We see that as being one of the biggest problems when it comes to that story having legs that will have it walk and run beyond just you and beyond when you're telling it. Why is that important when it comes to investing? Investors, VCs, right? Who's gonna get the word out? Who is going to repeat your story? Is somebody that's interested in investing going to be able to communicate that back to the rest of their team? Or is another firm going to pip you to the post and end up doing that? Because ultimately it becomes an investment arms race, right? And if you've got one potential investor and you've got two companies that they're looking at, I'm simplifying it, and one of those has a really clear story that that investor can repeat back to their team, to their firm, to maybe there's a decision-making committee within that VC. Maybe there's multiple people involved in it, and only one of them heard you tell the story. The firm that has that story make it through, run the gauntlet of the telephone game, is the one that's going to get heard first and is going to get repeated and then go beyond just the initial people that are told as well. Now, that's just one example. So dialing all of this back into, what does this have to do with a homepage? Well, our homepage is our best foot forward, right? The beauty, of course, of the homepage is we can have our blog there, we can have white papers, we can have resources galore. But when people are coming to our site, we don't know what group they're in, do we? Which segment or which stage of the sales cycle? We're not just shifting gears here away from investment for a minute. We're also thinking about the people who actually buy the product, because one of the things you're trying to do to the potential investors for Series B and beyond is show them that you know these audiences and these markets well enough to prove that the numbers that you've got on those slides are numbers that you can make work. Therefore, you need to know the different audiences that are landing on your site, how they're going to interact with what they see. Now, something we'll often talk about on these is this working for somebody that has typed in a high level search term, maybe not even knowing what the solution is, or the solution space, or the category. Maybe they got the action from their CEO or their line of business owner to go and solve this problem, and they're searching very, very problem based. And last week we went through some examples of what that can look like and who shows up in the Google search when that search is done. Now, sometimes, of course, we get people who know the category, maybe even know us as a company. And by the time they get to our website, they're already ready to go deep. So the website is serving a different purpose there. But I promise you, doing a great job of the potential customers who don't yet know that you're the one, doing a great job for that audience is not going to hurt the job that you're doing for those that are further down the sales cycle. Now, going back to the investment game, what are those big differences that we see between Series A and Series B? Well, it's those audiences. Series A, that's 80% of the business there has been in early adopters, maybe innovators and early adopters, if we think about the crossing the chasm model. Series B, on the other hand, that's where you show that you know how to get into the early majority. And those are very different audiences. And that's why so many stories fall down in the chasm, because they haven't been crafted in the right way for the right audience. And another thing that we see is frequently what will get you to Series A is a strong founder story and a lot of pitch power, shall we say. But after Series A, Series B and beyond, it really does go back to what we talked about a minute ago, and that is showing that you know these markets, you know how to reach these markets, connect with these markets, and say things to these markets that are going to get them to take the next action. With the prize being the action that they actually buy and invest with what you are selling. Okay, so based on that, we do have as I will jokingly call the companies that we do these teardowns on Fridays is our victim. Now, the companies that don't generally have not given us permission to do this, but it's the website, right? So this is out there, it's public, and we're gonna see what we can prospect and learn from this website and see what ideas maybe that we can come up with. Now, it's a lot running a business, and I have fond memories of, in fact, one of my closest friends was the internal owner of the Microsoft.com website. When I was at Microsoft, when I was chief storyteller for the ERP and CRM business, I wanted to get our customer stories onto the Microsoft.com property. And that's when I met Mike. And I heard the stories that he had to tell about running such a big company's homepage. And more than just the homepage, of course, all of the properties that were connected out from it, all of those, like we said, the blogs and all the information centers, all of the communication strategy, all of that, all the product groups, and all of the work that had to go into that. Now, that's an extreme example. Not every company's that big. But even if you're a Series A or a Series B company and you're the CMO, you've got a lot on your plate, right? You've got events, you've got PR, you've got the web, you've got your sales enablement materials, you've got product marketing. The list goes on. And storytelling, as fundamental as it is to who we are as humans, and story, right? Story and storytelling. So story is the noun, storytelling is the verb. Even though that's something that is at our core and something that is literally our operating system that we use to navigate through the day, applying it to business isn't easy. And it isn't easy because of all of that stuff that you're juggling, all that information, and all of the strategies, all those waypoints along the way to make it to the ultimate end goal of whatever part of the business it is that you're working on at any given time. And because of that, I get it. I understand why the story that we often want to tell doesn't land, and it doesn't land on our website. So bear that in mind. And I always want to throw a bone to our unsuspecting victim, because I know this stuff is hard, and that is why I do what I do and what Go Narrative does, what we do, because we take that load off of you, help you do a better job of it, and help you really bring to life the story that you want to tell. One analogy I said to one client was, it's like you own the concepts of the product, right? You as the founder and the inventor of the core team, you came up with this idea, and then you hired engineers to help you implement it, right? As you started to scale it out. That doesn't mean that idea, you still don't have ownership of that idea. Great podcast I listened to this week, the co-founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek, and he talks about the experience that he went through as a founder, gradually letting go bits and pieces of the business, right? And eventually product. But there's a lot going on, and you are trying to figure out, what is it that we want to say? What's that core story that we want to be telling? And of course, that might be a bit different to the event that we're at or the website that we're at. And so as we look at this website, I get it. I understand what the challenges are, and that's why we're here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go. Fantastic. Okay. Now, as we look through this, the 3Ds of story, the power of 3D storytelling is something you may have heard me talk about. It's desire, difficulty, and then the fancy French word, denouement. Desire, difficulty, and the untangling of the knot. Now, the reason why I mention that is when I look at a website, I am thinking to myself, where are the people? Because it's people who have desire. It's people who want to solve a problem, right? It's people who are ultimately our customers, and who knows where all the AI stuff's going, of course, but it's still the case today. So when we look at this site, turn shipping into a strategic value driver for your business. Shipium helps you make a promise you can keep, then keep the promise that you made by connecting teams, data, and systems across your supply chain. So what are some of the things that I'm seeing here? Well, first of all, I'm seeing that there's clearly Shipium have got a defined value proposition, and we see this crop up in other places on the site and blogs, and it's been shifted recently as well. So we've got this, there's a couple of things in here that jump out at me, right? The promises you can keep, and then keep the promise you made. And that sounds great. And that's absolutely a promise that Shipium's making to their customers. And that's very much about this, because we're talking about logistics, because we're talking about shipping, we're talking about companies being able to make a promise about when that product is going to arrive, and then that product arriving when it was promised. And this is important stuff, right? These are things that matter for Shipium's customers. And Shipium helps with that. Now, when we're looking at this, though, one of the things that I'm hunting for is this beyond just the human difficulties, right? And that's one from a customer perspective, this promise aspect, but the other being like the connecting teams, data, and systems across the supply chain. It's fairly generic, right? I mean, that itself, connecting teams, connecting data, connecting systems, okay? And I know that there's some AWS connections that Shipium have, and it makes me think of the fact that you could imagine talking about AWS connecting teams, datas, and systems, right? Maybe we take the supply chain off there, but then you could also look at some of Shipium's competition. You could say, are they doing that too? So we start to get into this defensibility point, right? Which is what's special. Now, what's special is important, and it's why ultimately somebody, once they've done the due diligence, is going to finally make that decision. This is something that I really see is going to be special for what I'm trying to do. But they're never going to get there if they didn't get pushed in that direction. I'm a big fan of saying that we never change direction. This is a law of nature. Is it Newton's third law? I shouldn't even try remembering the number of the law, but it's a body will remain in its state at rest or moving until an equal or opposite force is acted upon it. And In other words, what we can say is we don't change what we're doing unless there's a really good push for that to happen, right? And you could say we don't change what we're doing unless there's a really good reason for changing. But the reason, the logic, isn't why we want to change. The reason is doing something to us. Take a splinter, for example, a splinter in your finger, right? Yes, the logic is there is a very small piece of wood which somehow always causes so much more pain than it seems to be capable of. It's not like it's a giant blade or anything. It's this tiny piece of wood. Yet the pain, this feeling that we are getting is massive, right? And that feeling is a physical response, right? That feeling is that's the sharp pain in that case. But that is only the beginning of the whole repertoire, the whole library, the whole encyclopedia of feelings that we can tap into when it comes to business, right? Because, and it's often not that sharp a pain, it's often something more along the lines of anxiety or frustration or irritation, you name it, right? Think of the last customer service challenge that you had. It would be something along those lines. And those feelings get interpreted by us with our storytelling brains and our language into emotions. And emotions aren't fluffy, they are functional. And the emotions are something that we can tap into in language, right? I mean, if I was to go start swearing like a sailor right now and off-put half the audience, why does that happen? Because you're inferring a certain meaning from the words that I'm using, right? And we can utilize that in how we communicate, how we help, right? As a business. And in this case, what might that look like? Well, it might be the breaking of that promise. What does the breaking of that promise result in, right? What does that feel like? We know, Shipium knows in this case, that that's important. So we can take that next click down. We can also step back and we can look at the big picture. Is there a reason why this kind of stuff is going to be harder moving forward? Super easy one for us all to get instantly right now would be AI. Like, where's this going? How is this going to affect what I do, what my job is, how I do this? This is a transformation that we're experiencing, right? Zeitgeist, current state of affairs, if you will. And stuff's also happening in the shipping world, right? We're at this time of peak volatility and carrier unpredictability. Recent South Park had a toy that the kids wanted to buy and the price kept going up because of the tariffs, right? And all of these things are additional pressures on who Shipium is selling to, because who Shipium is selling to wants to help make promises, keep promises, right? So there's an opportunity to step that up, to even though we've spent our focus here really talking on this broken promise, we can even do it at the strategic value driver, right? Because This is a really great example of when we're working with folks, we talk about the curse of knowledge. It was a, I think it was Chip and Dan Heath in Made to Stick that coined it. And it's a natural state for any of us to fall into. And that is, we have so much information about what we do, right? And in this case, shipping, logistics, all of the details they know about their customers and the products, all of this vast repertoire of information. And if you got hired by Shipium tomorrow to do, even if it wasn't a working on the product role, you would start to absorb so much of this information, and that knowledge builds up within you, and it brings with it this curse. And that curse, sometimes heard in the US as inside baseball, is the language that we use that people who are not in a group that get it don't understand. And it can be really hard because the words supply chain, right? Of course, we're going to talk about supply chain, right? And in fact, I can see clearly that Shipium have made a big effort to, in the subhead, to not talk about what they do. And that deserves a thumbs up. Strategic value driver for your business, there's a what in there, but in the sub header here, or the paragraph, Shipium helps you make a promise you can keep, then keep promises that you made by connecting teams, data, systems in your supply chain. There's not a bunch of features jammed into here. And that, honestly, like, solid B+, because you have avoided talking about the what too specifically. It's more along the lines of the how, right? There's why we do what we do, how we go about doing it, process, approach, and what we end up delivering. And that's better than a lot of websites that we look at, right? But that curse of knowledge means you've got all this information. It's really hard to break out of it. And that is one of the reasons that story, coming up with the right story in business that you can then have your web team tell, your sales team tell, so on and so forth, is so hard to come up with, because you are being bombarded with all of these things. We need to say this, we have to cover this is so important. And there's some important processes that you can go through to distill that down. And not least of which is story discovery, understanding what is that core story in your business from the founder, from the core leadership team. Why is the beating heart of this business? Why is it doing what it does? And then building out that story guide, understanding what that story roadmap looks like. Just like you've got a product roadmap, what does that story roadmap look like? And then you can start to tell it, right? Put it into that, have that one pager clearly written as a simple several hundred words story that you can then have that paragraph from, right? And it's all connected, the red thread, very, very tight. And it's that beating heart, it's that why, it's that engine of why you do what you do. So there are some very specific ways you can get to that, and using tools like desire, difficulty, denouement, the power of 3D story, desire, difficulty, and the untangling of the knot. And even those things, in fact, if you look at our book, and the first chapter of this is actually available on the website, is if you just look at desire, for example, right? There's going to be some key areas of desire that you want to look into. And what the workbook does is it gives you some examples, right? So you've got a bunch of examples here. Can we even see that? The light's too bright. So each one of these boxes has got examples. So the first one, do they have a sense of purpose, a calling, a mission? What is it? Helping others succeed, improving the environment or world, inspiring others. has something changed in their life, business, or world that triggered the desire. Social media and self-image. The space race inspired a generation of scientists. The dot-com era inspired new business models. These are all examples, right? And then, because it's a workbook that we use in the workshops, is you have a place to write it down yourself. That gives you a sense of how you start to get into this process. And we've got several approaches that we use to help with that. And what that ultimately gives you is it gives you that way of cutting through the curse of knowledge, getting really clear and crystallizing what it is that you want to say. So where does that kind of bring us to in terms of like the opportunity of what could this potentially look like? Have a think of how would you as Shipium position this? Let's put this back full screen for a second so you can see. So what would you have as a headline? What kind of emotional response would you want to trigger, right? What about the paragraph underneath it, where we have that little bit of extra real estate? How could we press the right buttons, right? And not in the people who are already so far down the sales cycle, right? But the people who have been delegated to go and figure out how we can do a better job keeping the promises that we make to our customers. And I think some really good work's gone on here from Shipium, because I'm going to guess that language comes from customers, that it comes from research, that it comes from how people are searching as well, like broken shipping promises, like how to avoid breaking shipping commitments, right? And that all inputs into the big picture of the knowledge, which of course on the one hand is tugging at us because it's the curse of knowledge, but on the other hand is inputs into the process of thinking about what the story could look like. So when I look at this, I think, what could we do? What could we do from something that's going to kind of remember what we said about people don't change until there's a reason or a feeling that's going to push them in that direction. So we could have so if we think about the promises, if you are uncertain that you can keep your promises, what position does that put you in? It puts you in an uncertain position. What does uncertainty look like? When we're uncertain about something, what do we do? Imagine you're at a restaurant and you're sitting down and you're looking at the menu, and it's a new restaurant you've not been to before, and you recognize the names of the dishes on the menu, but you don't know what this restaurant, maybe you don't know what this restaurant is really well known for or does really well. Maybe there's even maybe it's a fusion restaurant and there's some different menu items that like surprise you a little bit. Like, why would we see that in this type of restaurant? So you're uncertain. What do? If you could ask somebody for help, but if you ask the server, maybe they don't know, maybe they're new, and maybe you're with a work crew in a different city, and somebody's going to be thinking right now, well, look at Google Maps and see what people said. I try that as well. I try that. But if we don't have any good signals, then we're going to have to guess, right? And we could use that for this. So we could say something like, the headline could be something like, "Stop guessing if you can deliver on time." Wow, what did that do? Guessing, closely connected with some emotions, frustration, concern, worry, to feelings of stress, the memory of that horrible Christmas where all those shipments went awry, and being the PTSD of getting the phone calls in the middle of all the horror that comes with something. And just like that, we're relieving it. Stop guessing if you can deliver on time. So that's something that we could do with this. And then we could also look to build on this idea of the strategic value driver of the business and take it a step further. So we could say for retail operations leaders managing multi-site fulfillment, we're saying that because we're thinking, we're talking about leaders, so we're connecting with their sense of ego as well as their role, right? And opposite of guess would be knowing, right? So knowing exactly what you can promise customers and delivering it at the lowest cost. No more missed ETAs, no more budget surprises. And it's still taking this concept of keeping promises. But what it's doing is it's saying this idea of keeping promises, that's a part of our core story. And we're going to flush that out. We're going to say that narrative is about keeping promises, right? And then that looks like meaning what we say, saying what we mean, actions speaking louder than words. Like here's what the core aspects of the narrative are, and here's why we do it, here's why we believe in it, and here's the story that we're trying to tell at that high level. And then you start to be able to take that and flush out your core story. And then you've got that core story. I've recently posted on LinkedIn about this idea of core versus lore. And it really crystallized for me with the latest 21 Pilots album, a band who's done an amazing job of storytelling. Yet the core story is very, very discreet. And there's a metaphor. So the metaphor is Clancy's trying to escape the city, and he thinks he does. And then the cycle begins again. And that's a metaphor for mental health and also personal struggles in life, right? That we struggle through something, we think we made it out the other side, and then there's something else that we have to deal with. And each time we get stronger and we learn, right? Very, very core. And there's a few other aspects to it as well, such as our support systems and so on, that I'm not going to do full justice on because this isn't a review of the 21 Pilots album Breach, which I love and recommend. But they, over 10 years, told this story in music videos, through the community, seeding information, fun stuff through the community. But in our case as a business, or Shipium as a business, here what we're looking at is the website is a part of that lore. And in the case of the website, something you've got control over, right? The sales deck, something you've got control over, then you give it to the sales team and they maybe tailor it to be their own. But because all of that ties back to what they're hearing the CEO, the founder say, what you are saying as the CMO standing up at an event, all of these things tie together. They're all lore, right? And that core versus lore is get the core right and the lore will follow. And for those of you who are movie fans or TV fans, go and look at your favorite kind of extensive property, Game of Thrones or Star Wars, and look at that, not to get storytelling advice, because that's a very different type of storytelling, but to look at how those parts of those expressions of story would take a core idea and then manifest it off into all these different ways. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm watching the Star Wars Visions. It's animated. It's manga, anime manga, and there's the core is there, the force is there, lightsabers are there, but the expression is very unique. But it all ties back and it all accrues up and adds to this overall big picture. And so that's what you have the opportunity to do here. And that promise keeping aspect can show up. It doesn't have to be explicitly stated, right? And there might be a very strong argument and case for having that language on the website, but it also doesn't mean that we can't find some more emotive words that are going to trigger people in a way that's going to keep them engaged, keep them emotionally invested, and keep them moving forward. So we could say, you know, like what is the kind of the bottom line on this, right? We don't want to be abstract. We want to be nice and clear and crystal. We want to be specific and actionable. We want to be real, right? I was giving some feedback on some content yesterday, and it was, what was the word I ended up changing it from? The word I chose was say. It was communicate. That was it. So it was communicate and say. It's like, we don't need to say communicate. Say is human. It's tangible. That's what we should be doing. We're going to make this as human as possible. And by doing that, we connect with the humans on the other end. And when they're doing research with AI, we're more likely to show up because we are going to look like we're going to show up in a way that is human, that's covering the whole human experience, not just the features and capabilities of something, but also the effects and the why that's important. And AI is looking at all of that, and it's saying, who's got the biggest complete picture that's going to give me what I need to serve up content to the user. So somebody could be doing research for supply chains and promise keeping and delivery and SLAs and happy customers and all of that good stuff. And maybe they use the word promise. Maybe they don't, but maybe they do. And that's a human being who's asking that of the AI. So when the AI goes out to then find it, and then they find Shipium, and because if Shipium's got, the deck is stacked positively in Shipium's favor with more than just the features, which will be on the website, because look, we've got platform, products, industries, tons of opportunity for all the depth that we need. And that's why I love talking about the homepage, because the homepage is a great indicator of how have we built that core story and how is the lore being built on top of that. Because the website is one of those first and arguably one of the most important pieces of lore. And if you're a Series A firm and you've got a pitch deck and you're going into to prove out to Series B, then this is all going to be a part of it. Like everything we've talked about today, like we know this audience, we know what's keeping them up at night, and we know how to solve that. And then you can pass the straight face tests when questions start coming about the competition, right? And in fact, you can even head those off because you're proving that you know that market so well that the numbers you're showing on the slides in your pitch deck aren't just made up, right? They are rooted in reality, because all numbers are is a proxy for meaning anyway, right? Just like words. Different symbols, right? That are proxies for meaning. And the words and the story then become the proxy for the human side of the equation, which is the why does it matter? And when you get that, and you get the how, and you get the what, and you have all of it, you are the logical choice to invest in because you know it all and you've articulated it as well. Fantastic. So I'd love to see, you go further, right? You have a look at the blogs, you have a look at events, you have a look at podcasts, you go and have a look at any company, go look at your company and ask yourself the question, do we have a strong core? Is that core doing the why, the how, and the what? Are we connecting with people? Are we moving people to act? And are all of these things tying together? And a great place to start is to go and look at your website. So thank you so much. I love doing these. I hope Shipium has a chance to see this and enjoys it and can take it and run with it. And like I said, it's hard. I get it. Absolutely. And when you got a million things on your plate and the website is one, but hopefully some ideas here that show you how it's more than just a website. There's some stuff behind it that then is informing the lore of the website. So I hope this has been useful. And of course, whether you're Shipium or anybody, that you've taken some really useful elements away from this in terms of what is a story, right? Well, it's moving people to act. It's getting people to feel things. It's this human operating system, right? These are all things that sometimes you'll tune in when we'll talk about the 3D framework in a bit more and kind of go into the details of that. And today we're not, because we're keeping this a little bit tighter today. We've got sprint qualifying for the US Grand Prix, and looking forward to seeing that, which I think started at 3:30. But that's another great way to think about things moving fast and being a strong story, yet having all the technology behind it, all the details, all that stuff that you have to get right. Shipium, keep doing what you're doing. I hope you keep getting it right, and keep nailing it from a tech perspective, and I'm sending you power vibes for the story. Anybody wants to reach out, DMs on LinkedIn, website, and I pop the email up here as well. Respond to all the DMs and emails. You got questions about story and what we talked about today, and love to connect and have a story strategy session about your business and figure out, what does your fundraising timeline look like, and what kind of story have you got? Have you got that core buttoned up yet? And hear you tell your story and give you some feedback on that and see what the opportunities are. Check out the website, loads of resources up there as well. You can go deep down this rabbit hole, and useful resources. I also understand that it's a big thing to lift and to carry. Wishing you the best with the story, your personal story. And what I want you to do first thing tomorrow is I want you to think about your story, your personal story, something you're working on right now. What do you want, your desire? What's the difficulty? What's standing in the way? How are you untangling that knot? And tell your best friend, tell your spouse, tell one of your kids. The power of 3D story. 3Ds, desire, difficulty, denouement. Denouement, French word for untangling the knot. And may the power of story be with you. Have a great one. Have a great weekend. And if you're an F1 fan, and in the US in particular, enjoy the F1 this weekend as well. Take care and have a great one. Bye for now.